You know what's harder than hiding a stolen elephant in a studio apartment? Hiding 11.5 million stolen documents when every journalist on the planet just got a copy. April 2016. The biggest data leak in history drops like a nuclear bomb on the financial world. The Panama Papers, 2.6 terabytes, 214,488 offshore entities, clients from 200 countries. And at the center of it all, a law firm in Panama that spent 40 years helping the world's elite play hide-and-seek with their money. Everyone talks about the Panama Papers like it was this shocking revelation. Oh my God, rich people hide money offshore? Yeah, and water is wet, partner. But here's what nobody tells you. Mossack Fonseca wasn't just some rogue operation. They were the Amazon Prime of financial secrecy. One-click shell companies, same-day incorporation, and customer service so good they'd help you backdate documents if you asked nicely. The kicker? This isn't ancient history. The skeleton of this scam, the exact same offshore architecture, is being used right now by every crypto guru, promising you financial freedom from their rented Lambo. Before we go further, this video is for educational purposes only. We're not providing financial or legal advice. We're just following the money to show you exactly how the con works. Because the best defense against fraud? Knowing the game. I'm Michael Greenberg, and I've been auditing offshore accounts since before Bitcoin was a twinkle in Satoshi's eye. Now, let's talk about how you hide $8 trillion. Here's what Mossack Fonseca sold. Invisibility, not for superheroes, for money. The company was founded in 1977 by Jürgen Mossack, a German expat, and Ramon Fonseca, a Panamanian novelist turned lawyer. And right there, you should have known something was up. A novelist? Running a law firm? That's like hiring your yoga instructor to do your taxes. But these guys understood something fundamental about human psychology. Everyone wants a secret door. The product was simple. Shell companies. Now, a shell company isn't illegal. It's a corporate entity with no active business operations. Think of it as an empty box with a business card. You can use it for legitimate reasons, holding intellectual property, managing investments, protecting privacy during complex mergers. But Mossack Fonseca? They weren't selling legitimate asset protection. They were selling financial ghost stories. Here's the con. Step 1. The incorporation. You call Mossack Fonseca. You say, "I need discretion." They say no more. Within 24 hours, you've got a brand new company registered in the British Virgin Islands, Panama, or any of a dozen other jurisdictions with secrecy laws tighter than a submarine's airlock. Step 2. The nominee. But wait, someone's name has to be on the paperwork, right? Can't just be anonymous. Wrong! Mossack Fonseca employed nominee directors and nominee shareholders. These are people whose literal job is to sign their name on your company and then forget it exists. They're the decoys, the crash test dummies. One nominee might be listed as the director of 2,000 companies simultaneously. Think about that. One person, 2,000 companies. You seeing this, partner? Step 3. The bank account. Now your shell company needs a bank account. Mossack Fonseca had relationships with banks across the globe. Credit Suisse, HSBC, Société Générale. They'd provide reference letters vouching for the company's legitimacy, and boom, your invisible company can now move real money. Step 4. The onion layers. But why stop at one shell company? The truly sophisticated clients would set up chains of them. Company A owns Company B, which owns Company C, which owns the yacht you're pretending not to own. By the time investigators try to figure out who actually owns what, they're 6 jurisdictions deep, chasing paperwork through Samoa, Seychelles, and Singapore. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube where every square is the same color. The impossible math. Here's why it worked. Mossack Fonseca created over 214,000 shell entities. If even 10% of those were used for tax evasion, and the average hidden wealth per entity was conservatively $5 million, we're talking about $100 billion in concealed assets. But the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, ICIJ, estimates the global offshore wealth hidden through structures like these: $8 trillion to $32 trillion. You know what's insane about those numbers? The low end, $8 trillion, is roughly the GDP of Japan and Germany combined. The high end is basically the entire US GDP, and Mossack Fonseca was just one firm. Now, I know what you're thinking. Greenberg, offshore accounts aren't always illegal. You're right. But let me tell you something I learned in 30 years of forensic accounting. When someone works this hard to be invisible, they're not hiding a surprise birthday party. And here's the part that affects you, partner. You think this is just for billionaires? Every time a company like this hides $1 billion, your local school loses a wing. Your roads get another pothole. Your hospital wait times get longer. You are paying the invisibility tax for the elite. They dodge. You cover the bill. That's not theoretical. That's math. The Tax Justice Network estimated that offshore tax evasion costs governments globally $427 billion per year. In the US alone, the IRS estimated that the tax gap, the difference between what's owed and what's collected, was $441 billion annually as of 2019. A significant chunk of that? Offshore hiding. When billionaires don't pay taxes, you do. Through crumbling infrastructure, through underfunded services, through the slow erosion of the social contract. The psychology here is textbook. Robert Cialdini wrote about the principle of social proof in his book Influence. When we see others doing something, especially people we admire, we assume it's acceptable. Mossack Fonseca's client list read like a Fortune 500 VIP lounge. 12 current or former world leaders, 128 politicians, the Prime Minister of Iceland, the President of Ukraine, close associates of Vladimir Putin, even FIFA officials, because apparently bribing your way through soccer wasn't enough. They wanted tax-free bribes. When that many powerful people are using the same service, it creates a perception of legitimacy. If the Prime Minister has a shell company, why shouldn't I? That's the con within the con. Now we get to the good part, the forensic flow. Because you can't hide $8 trillion forever. Money doesn't just sit still, it moves, it flows. And every time it flows, it leaves a trail. Question is, who's following it? The leak. It started with an anonymous source, early 2015. A German newspaper called Süddeutsche Zeitung received a message. Interested in data? The source, identified only as John Doe, offered the journalists access to Mossack Fonseca's entire internal database. Every client, every transaction, every email, all of it. Over the next year, 2.6 terabytes of data were transferred. That's the equivalent of roughly 11.5 million documents. To put that in perspective, the WikiLeaks Cablegate leak was 1.7 gigabytes. Edward Snowden's NSA files were about 1.7 million documents. The Panama Papers dwarfed both, combined. Süddeutsche Zeitung knew they couldn't handle this alone, so they reached out to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, ICIJ. The ICIJ then coordinated with over 370 journalists across 76 countries. Think about the operational security required to keep this secret for a year while hundreds of journalists combed through millions of documents. That alone is more impressive than most government operations I've audited. The digital breadcrumbs. Now, let's trace one flow. I'm going to show you exactly how the money moved in a real case. The Sergei Roldugin Network. Sergei Roldugin is a classical cellist. He's also Vladimir Putin's best friend. According to the Panama Papers, this cellist somehow became a secret stakeholder in a network of offshore companies that moved at least $2 billion through banks and shadow companies. Here's the flow. 1. Start point. Bank Rossiya in St. Petersburg, Russia. Deposits made into accounts controlled by offshore companies linked to Roldugin. 2. First hop. Funds transferred to Sandalwood Continental Limited, a shell company registered in the British Virgin Islands through Mossack Fonseca. Third hop. From Sandalwood, money flows to International Media Overseas, another BVI shell company. This entity purchased shares in a Russian truck manufacturer and a television network. 4. The wash. Profits from these investments, reportedly $200 million in one case, are routed through another shell company, Raytar Limited, registered in Cyprus. 5. Endpoint. Funds eventually loop back to Russian entities or remain parked offshore in accounts controlled by Roldugan's network. Now, here's the beauty. At each step, a different nominee director signed off. Different bank, different jurisdiction, different currency. By the time you're done tracing it, you've filed Freedom of Information requests in 6 countries, translated documents from Russian, Arabic, and Mandarin, and you're on a first-name basis with clerks at corporate registries across the Caribbean. The IRS, FBI, and international agencies like EUROPOL spent years untangling these flows. The sheer volume of paperwork was designed to exhaust investigators. Death by bureaucracy. The offshore hubs, Mossack Fonseca used the same jurisdictions over and over. These weren't random choices. These were engineered for secrecy. But the real genius, Mossack Fonseca used bearer shares. Bearer shares are like cash for companies. Whoever physically holds the share certificate owns the company. No registration, no names, just possession. Imagine if you could own a house by holding a piece of paper, and if you lost the paper, someone else owned your house. That's bearer shares. They were the financial equivalent of Mission Impossible's self-destructing tape, untraceable, transferable, perfect for hiding ownership. The OECD estimated that bearer shares were used in over 30% of corporate fraud cases involving offshore jurisdictions. The Financial Action Task Force, FATF, the global watchdog for money laundering, called them one of the highest risk products for illicit financial flows. And Mossack Fonseca issued them like candy. Sources and stats, because numbers don't lie. You seeing the scale here, partner? This wasn't a few bad apples. This was an orchard. Let's talk about the other side of this story. Because while Sergei Roldugan is collecting his $200 million dividends, there's a teacher in Reykjavik who just found out her prime minister was hiding assets offshore while preaching austerity. There's a pensioner in Argentina whose retirement fund was plundered by officials who then stashed the money in a BVI shell company. There's a Pakistani journalist named Umar Chima who investigated offshore accounts linked to his country's elite and was abducted, beaten, and left on the side of a highway as a warning. The human cost tax evasion isn't a victimless crime, it's theft. Every dollar hidden offshore is a dollar that doesn't fund schools, hospitals, infrastructure, or social services. But the consequences go beyond budgets. When citizens see their leaders enriching themselves while demanding sacrifice from everyone else, trust in institutions collapses, democracy erodes, cynicism metastasizes. Iceland's Prime Minister, Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson, was revealed in the Panama Papers to have secretly owned an offshore company called Vintris Inc. while negotiating Iceland's financial crisis recovery. He'd never disclosed it. When the news broke, 10,000 Icelanders, roughly 3% of the country's entire population, protested outside parliament. He resigned within days. Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and his family were found to own luxury London properties through offshore companies. The Supreme Court of Pakistan disqualified him from office in 2017. In 2018, he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. In Argentina, President Mauricio Macri's name appeared in the Panama Papers linked to offshore entities. Public outrage contributed to his eventual electoral defeat in 2019. The human cost isn't abstract. It's measurable. It's names. But here's the thing about leaks this big. The money trail doesn't just embarrass people. It ends them. May 2016. Panamanian authorities raid Mossack Fonseca's offices. They seize hard drives, servers, documents. But here's the twist. Employees had already started shredding for weeks. The ICIJ estimated that by the time investigators arrived, significant evidence was already destroyed. February 2017, Jürgen Mossack and Ramon Fonseca are arrested. Charges: money laundering in connection with Brazil's Operation Car Wash scandal, a massive corruption scheme involving state oil company Petrobras, and offshore bribes totaling over $2 billion. March 2018, Mossack Fonseca announces it's shutting down. The firm releases a statement blaming the media for mischaracterizing their work. Sure, guys, it was the media's fault you incorporated 214,000 shell companies for arms dealers, drug cartels, and kleptocrats. December 2022, Ramon Fonseca dies at age 71 while awaiting trial on money laundering charges. January 2024, a Panamanian court acquits Jürgen Mossack and 26 others due to insufficient evidence and procedural issues, a decision that outraged anti-corruption advocates worldwide. But civil and international cases continue. Global prosecutions. But Mossack and Fonseca weren't the only ones who went down. United States, 4 defendants, including 2 Mossack Fonseca employees, were charged by the U.S. Department of Justice in a 2018 indictment for wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering conspiracy. The DOJ alleged they helped clients evade over $100 million in U.S. taxes. Germany. Authorities prosecuted multiple individuals connected to offshore tax schemes revealed in the papers, recovering millions in unpaid taxes. France. French investigators opened over 500 cases, dozens of prosecutions, assets seized, fines levied. HSBC faced regulatory scrutiny and fines for processing transactions flagged in the papers. Credit Suisse entered a guilty plea in 2021 for helping wealthy Americans hide assets, paying $2.6 billion in penalties, not just for Panama Papers cases, but the leak exposed systemic issues. But here's what grinds me, partner. For every person who went down, a dozen walked away. The shell companies dissolved, the nominees vanished, and the money, most of it is still out there, hidden, flowing, waiting for the next Mossack Fonseca to offer a fresh coat of paint. So, why did we fall for this? Because we wanted to believe the story was complicated. It wasn't. Mossack Fonseca sold a simple product. Don't ask, don't tell. They built a machine that let the powerful pretend their wealth was someone else's problem. And for 40 years, the machine hummed along because no one with the power to stop it wanted to look too closely. The psychology of the con. There's a concept in criminology called neutralization theory, developed by sociologists Gresham Sykes and David Matza. It's how people justify unethical behavior to themselves. 5 techniques. Every single client in the Panama Papers used at least one of these justifications, usually all 5. But the real con? It was never about the complexity of the offshore structures. It was about willful blindness. Banks processed the transactions. Regulators looked the other way. Governments negotiated tax treaties with secrecy jurisdictions while publicly condemning tax evasion. It was a collective decision to ignore the elephant in the room. How do we stop it? Next time, here's the hard truth. We probably don't. Not completely, because as long as there are jurisdictions that prioritize financial secrecy over transparency, there will be Mossack Fonsecas. They'll just rebrand. New name. Same game. But we can make it harder. Beneficial ownership. Registries. Force every company to disclose who actually owns it. No more nominee directors. No more bearer shares. The UK, EU, and recently the US, via the Corporate Transparency Act of 2021, have moved in this direction. International cooperation. Tax authorities need to share information across borders seamlessly. The OECD's Common Reporting Standard is a start, but enforcement is inconsistent. Criminalize enablers. It's not enough to go after the clients. Go after the lawyers, accountants, and bankers who build the structures. Make complicity expensive. Whistleblower protections. John Doe risked everything to expose Mossack Fonseca. We need legal frameworks that protect and reward people who bring these schemes to light. And you, partner, you can help. And you, partner, you can help. Pay attention. When a politician preaches austerity while vacationing on yachts, ask where the money came from. When a crypto expert promises untraceable wealth, remember, untraceable means unaccountable. When financial gurus glamorize offshore structures as tax optimization, call it what it is, tax evasion with a thesaurus. The Panama Papers proved something crucial. Sunlight still works. When the truth came out, governments fell, prosecutions followed. The machine slowed down, even if it didn't stop. But that only happens if we keep looking, keep asking, keep demanding answers. Because the next Mossack Fonseca is already out there, setting up shell companies in some jurisdiction you've never heard of, and they're counting on you to look the other way. Don't. Ramon Fonseca. Co-founder, Mossack Fonseca. Money laundering. Arrested, 2017. Died awaiting trial, 2022. Jürgen Mossack. Co-founder, Mossack Fonseca. Money laundering. Arrested, 2017. Acquitted, 2024. Procedural error. Sigmundur D. Gunnlaugsson, Prime Minister, Iceland. Undisclosed offshore holdings. Forced resignation, 2016. Nawaz Sharif, Prime Minister, Pakistan. Corruption/offshore assets. Convicted, 2018, 10 years, later reduced. 4 U.S. defendants. Mossack Fonseca employees/clients. Wire fraud, tax evasion. Charged, 2018. Ongoing prosecutions. Mossack Fonseca firm, law firm, N.A. Dissolved, 2018. That's the forensic flow. Follow the money. Always. I'm Michael Greenberg, and I'll see you in the next investigation. Want to see how one MDB connects to all of this? Hit that bell icon, because partner, the skeleton is still here, and it's using your data this time.